You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
Thanks for tuning into Mining Stock Education. I'm your host, Bill Powers. Joining me today is Dave Kranzler of Investment Research Dynamics. He is also the editor of the Mining Stock Journal. Dave's a fan favorite of the show as he shares and talks through some of his recent picks and why he's invested in them, which provides a great lead source for you for if you're looking for new mining stock investing opportunities. So Dave, welcome back onto the show. And I think we should let our guests that are watching us on YouTube know that we did not color code the lime shirts together before we did this podcast, did we? Well, welcome to the show. And what's your view on the big picture view of what's going on economically before we delve into the junior mining stock sector?
Oh, hey, Bill. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure. And, one thing I like about your audience is I know, especially just because, they listen to your shows all the time, they're way more educated about junior mining stocks and the mining industry in general than the larger retail audience. So it's always fun to know I'm speaking to an audience that's further up the curve than most people. So, it was funny because I went back and I looked at the last podcast we did, which was, I think we recorded it like maybe the first or second week of March. And I had suggested that the sector was getting ready for a move higher. And I actually had done these numbers for my Mining Stock Journal yesterday, the new issue. And since mid-March, gold's up 12.7%. Silver's up 15.3%. And it may not feel like it because they're so volatile, but if you look at the chart, you'll see. I mean, I looked at the chart, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize we were up this much since March. And GDX is up since the beginning of March. GDX is up 30%, and that's versus 7.9% for the S&P 500, and most people are probably not aware of that because we hear so much about, the manipulation of the metals and the intervention, blah, blah, blah. And we hear so much about tech stocks and Tesla and ARK investment. And, that's one of the things I like about the precious metal sector, although there's a much wider investor audience now than there was 20 years ago, is that there's not very many people paying attention to it relative to the greater market, and, I'm sure if you go to a cocktail party this weekend, people can tell you right away, how much the S&P is up in the last couple months and how much their portfolio is up. They wouldn't be able to tell you how much gold or silver or mining stocks are up since March. So I guess this is to sort of lead in about where I think the market's going. We've had a good run over the last 2+ months in the sector. And so it's, it feels like it's kind of sluggish going sideways right now. And for sure, that's the case. I mean, there's going to be heavy resistance at 1900 on gold. And we're seeing that right now. And there's going to be heavy resistance for silver at 28. And we're seeing that right now. But part of that is just kind of working off a technically overbought condition. And I'm not a big technical analyst. And I don't advocate investing based on it, but you have to pay attention to it. I mean, if gold and silver and the mining stocks have had a big run recently, I wouldn't recommend plowing in with half your net worth and, wait for the sector to consolidate or pull back. So you can so you're not chasing it, and so what I think will probably happen is we'll probably grind sideways for a few weeks. And I think gold will be volatile, above and below 1900. And I think the mining stocks, which have been pretty sluggish this week, even though, gold made a run this week at 1900, a quiet run. And silver was over 28 for a while, and it looked like it might have been heading to 29. So you would have thought, geez, my mining stock should be flying. Well, they've been sluggish. Well, they're digesting a 30% gain over the last 2 months, right? And so I think once we kind of work through this consolidation period and people realize that inflation is not transitory and that the Fed's going to continue printing a lot of money and the government's going to continue with a huge amount of deficit spending, I think we're going to have a relatively good move in the precious metal sector between now and Labor Day. And again, I don't want to put price targets out there. I do think that, we're going into the beginning of the summer. I think by the end of the summer, we'll be, considerably higher than where we are right now.
And are you of the view that other things people invest in, such as the general equities, we have to see that turn over so that they would then desire to move into the precious metals to protect their purchasing power?
And that brings up a good point because, any kind of forecast for the sector, you have to acknowledge that at least over the short term, if there's a stock market accident, and there very well could be, given the nosebleed valuations and the mania that's been going on for the last few years in the stock market, if there is a stock market accident like we saw in February and March of 2020, it's going to take everything down with it temporarily, right? I mean, even the precious metal sector got hammered back then, but the precious metal sector started moving higher before the general stock market did. The general stock market didn't start moving higher until Powell promised, injecting a few $1 trillion into the financial system. And that's what got the general stock market moving. The mining stocks and the precious metals were moving ahead of that. And I think, if we have a stock market accident this summer, we'll see a similar dynamic where everything is, it's just technical. Hedge funds are levered up the wazoo right now. And when this market starts, the general stock market starts heading south, they sell everything. They have to, or they're going to get margin calls because they're on leverage. And that's part of the dynamic that takes everything down. You got, scared investors, et cetera. But if that does happen, make sure you have plenty, keep plenty of cash on hand right now, just because of uncertainty over the markets in general. And if we do get that stock market accident, back up the dump truck and buy your favorite mining stocks. Go buy some physical gold and silver. That's what I would recommend. So I will say that the stock market will reach a point, if that happens, where the stock market could keep going lower, but the precious metal sector will start to move a lot higher. And we saw that in 2008 at the end of October. The stock market had already gone down quite a bit, as had the precious metals. But at the end of October, gold and silver started taking off. At the beginning of November, the mining stocks started taking off, while the S&P continued going south. The S&P didn't bottom until March of 2009. And again, it was Fed money printing that saved the day. But the Huey index, the Amex Gold Bugs index, doubled from early November to December 31st, 2008. And I think that's probably the scenario that I think is most likely to play out if we do get that stock market accident. Otherwise, the sector is going to continue moving higher along with the general stock market, and it'll outperform it like it has over the last 2 months.
Torque Resources is an exploration company establishing a portfolio of premier copper-gold early-stage projects in Chile. Torque's management and technical teams have a strong track record of raising capital, discovery, and monetization of exploration successes. The company's Margarita copper-gold project is located within the prolific coastal Cordillera Belt in Chile, which hosts some of the world's largest and most profitable copper mines. The Margarita project possesses excellent discovery potential for a major copper discovery due to the strength of the alteration system, large-scale magnetic targets, and the presence of copper oxide mineralization. Drilling is anticipated to begin in Q3 of this year. Torque trades in Canada under TORQ and on the OTC under TRBMF. To learn more, go to torqueresources.com. That's torqueresources.com. I'm just going to hand it over to you. Listeners like hearing the ideas, investing ideas you're willing to share. So the floor is yours. I might interject with some questions, but where have you been seeing value?
Well, that's a great question. And I want to preface this by saying that this is a new idea for me, and it's a new idea for my subscribers. And my latest Mining Stock Journal just went out yesterday. And I normally try to embargo a new idea for, at least a few weeks, if not longer, so that my subscribers have a chance to digest the presentation and decide whether they want to invest or not. But it's getting harder and harder, as you know, to find new ideas that people haven't already jumped on already. And this is one of those very early stage ideas when I spoke to the guy who was one of the co-founders and a director of the company a couple of days ago. He said, "Oh, I was surprised to get your email. I'm not getting, I don't get very many new investor inquiries, because they're not out marketing their company yet. They're still working on getting their maiden drilling program going." And the way I found the idea is I've been covering and investing in and recommending New Gold for about 18 months. It was when New Gold took a big hit from $4.50 down to $2 or something, and not $2, under $1. I was thinking of Fortuna, which I also cover. But with the mid caps and smaller cap producers, when I see a big hit like that, that's when I start taking a look at those. And so that's how I started taking a look at New Gold. And when I was reading through their earnings call transcript last week or 10 days ago, whatever it was, I happened to notice that they had mentioned that they had made investments in three companies. One of them was this company, Angus Gold. And that's how I found the idea. And I went to the website and I was like, oh, I like this idea. So, and what was interesting is there was only one analyst who asked a couple questions on the conference call. So I'm like, no one's going to see this because there's no one on this conference call. So anyway, I started taking a look at it, and just in a nutshell.
Could you give the ticker just so, because sometimes we get that in the comments. What's the ticker?
Oh yeah, sure. It's the OTC ticker is ANGVF, and the TSX Venture ticker is GUS, GUS.
Thank you.
So, and just in a nutshell, they've consolidated the second largest land holding in a gold camp in Ontario called the Wawa Camp. And that's where West Dome has its two operating mines. And also Alamos Gold's Island Mine is there. I believe Barrick and Newmont also have operating mines there. And then there's, a handful of companies that have, gold deposits that they're advancing there. So it's a highly prospective and prolific gold camp. And it's, the grades for the mines that are operating, it's considered high grade for the type of mines that they are. So what I like about this company is, first of all, I like their land package. I like where it is. It's got good DNA. Now that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily make a discovery. It was part of the property was that they've consolidated, was explored in the early 2000s. There was a company named Trelawney Resources. I don't know if you remember them. Another company, I think it's called Metal Corp. I can't remember them. They might be private. And they had done some drilling, and there's a small resource on part of the property, and it's pretty good grades. And so what the game plan is this is a group of mining company executives who were able to reach out to the private landholders and consolidate this land. And they're getting ready to drill on it. They've just raised between, New Gold bought 10% of it. So between New Gold and between a financing they did last summer, they've got about 5 million Canadian that they're going to pour into the ground. It's got extremely low overhead. And one of the things I really like about it is it's got a very small amount of shares, a very tight capital structure. So it's something like 34 million shares or 35 million fully diluted. There's like 1.5 million worth of stock options that insiders own. And then the rest are just primary shares. And they're trying to avoid doing financings that require warrants to get done. And I talked about it with the guy I spoke to. And insiders own almost 50% of it. So insiders own almost 50%. So, your interests are very heavily aligned with insiders, and New Gold owns 10% of it. And I don't know that New Gold is necessarily the exit strategy, but clearly New Gold saw an opportunity that they thought had high potential upside. They're going to start drilling. I believe they're in the process securing a rig, and they're waiting to get their permits issued, and ideally the drilling will start at the end of June. And they're going to do a complete, the first part of their drill program. They're going to wait until all the assays are back, and then they'll release the assays. So you probably won't. There's not necessarily going to be a news catalyst that'll move this stock until October or November. And so now I think,
Dave, on that note, something I'm always asking exploration companies is, how good is your relationship with the assay labs? Because so many companies are not meeting stated expectation, and it's not their fault. It's the assay labs are so backed up, and the COVID protocols of 6 feet apart, can't have as many people working at the same time. I mean, what's the situation here on that?
We talked about that, and he said that the assay labs are backed up there, but it's starting to clear up. But they've already built 10 to 12 weeks into their expectations for getting the assays back, and they're going to start turning in the assays as soon as they have the core samples or the drill samples prepared to send to the lab. So, I mean, they start drilling at the end of June. They'll start sending samples probably by, I don't know, the end of July, whatever. So I feel pretty confident that, we'll see assays that we'll hear the results of this first part of their drill program in October, November. And he was careful to case it October, November, not, mid-October. So they've built room in for all of this. So, and I think, if it's an idea that you look at and you're in, one thing I'll mention is that it's not real liquid right now. I mean, if you have access to trading on the TSX, it's a little more liquid. So I wouldn't go out and start trying to buy a big position all at once. It's something that I think you need to accumulate slowly over time. I have some in my fund, and I'm going to buy some personally after my subscribers have had a chance to buy shares. But this is one of those things that, again, and there's no guarantee that they're going to make a discovery. Who knows? They could go through this drill program, and this is a maiden drill program. They might not find anything. They'll certainly get information that will help them follow up on this drill program if they don't find anything, that tells them where to stick the next drill holes so that they can find something. There's a portion of the property that's called a banded iron formation, and we talked about that. And most people would just associate that with iron mining, but some of the bigger gold mines in the world come from banded iron formation gold deposits. And so part of their property is banded iron formation. It hasn't been drilled yet, but he said Trelawney took some grab samples in the early 2000s, the middle part of the early 2000s. And again, grab samples don't necessarily mean anything, but there was, they averaged 10 to 15 grams per ton of gold mineralization. So they're going to, when they're done with the first part of their drill program, they'll start putting some holes in the banded iron formation, I think this fall. And, that's the type of thing where if they make a discovery, the stock could go up 2 to 3 times very quickly, just because of what it means if they do have something meaningful in a banded iron formation. So,
and what's your time frame that you've given them to succeed? Like when you buy a stock like Angus Gold, what's your expectation for holding it?
I mean, this is very early stage, and it's probably not going to be one of those ones that you buy and gets heavily promoted by the usual promoters. And Eric Sprott comes along and buys a small amount and the stock goes crazy. I don't think that's what this, and that's not what their intent is with this. So one of the things that I liked about them is they seem to be more focused on making it. I mean, they own half of the shares. They want to make a discovery and get rich off of it. They're not focused on spending money on promotion and G&A. I mean, their monthly G&A is ridiculously low. They want all the money that they have right now to go into the ground. I think you got to give an idea like this at least 2 rounds of drilling. So like this drill program say they start drilling at the end of June and it goes for about 12 months. They may make a discovery, they may not, but they'll probably have to raise some more money after that, and they'll do another round of drilling. And sometimes it takes a long. West Dome, it took them, I think, 10 years before they finally made a discovery. And it was a massive discovery, obviously. So this one, again, I would just, if you're going to own it, keep in mind that, you might lose all your money if they hit dusters. I'll have a small position in my personal account, and I've got a very, very underweighted position in my fund. And, I'll add to that after I see the drill assay results this fall. If the stock gets hammered because of the general market, I might add a little more between then and now. But this is one of those things where it could be like watching popcorn pop, most of the kernels may have popped, and you're waiting for the rest of the kernels to pop. It may take a while for this kernel to pop if there is something to be found there. So when you invest in this, I think you got to give it at least a year.
And that's kind of your approach, isn't it? Where you take a starter position when the drills are turning, and then if you like what you see, you add to it after that.
Yes, that's correct. And oftentimes, after 2 or 3 years, I'll throw up my hands, wave the white flag, and I inform my subscribers, hey, I'm just not seeing the progress I want to see with this. I'll continue to update the name, but I'm out of it. My fund's not in it anymore. And here's why, I think there might be better opportunities out there. So, and that, that happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often. I think most of my ideas usually perform at least in line with the sector. And then I've had, some pretty big home runs. So this one feels, again, it's too early to say for sure. This one feels like it could be a home run.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Dave. Is there anything you wanted to share on that before we move on to the next one?
Again, I would just probably emphasize, don't go, if you're going to buy the stock, just try and buy it slowly because it's not real liquid. And if, you and I were looking at the volume earlier. Even on days where there's a lot of activity in it, it's 20,000 shares on the US ticker. So it's a little more liquid on the TSX ticker, but
limit orders always, right? With these stocks, always limit orders.
Well, I usually don't always do that, but yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. For listeners, use a limit order, set your price that you're willing to buy it at and put that in. Do not do a market order.
Keep in mind, if you buy a stock like this, your order alone could move the market a little bit higher, and you might get done, buying what you want to buy. And then all of a sudden the stock drops back 5% or whatever. That happened to me the other day. I just wanted to put on a position and not worry about, my average cost yet. And it's below what I paid for it right now, but whatever. This is one of those stocks where you're not going to be 5 or 10 cents right. It's a binomial outcome. It's either not going to work or it's going to be a 5 to 10 bagger.
And that's something new investors should learn. Like, this is not a proxy for the gold price, right? Like you said, the value creation is going to be determined by the drill bit, not by the day-to-day movements of the gold price. And some new investors I've learned don't realize that.
That's exactly right. I get emails from subscribers, should I put in a mid-market order or, and it's like with an illiquid 15-cent stock. I'm like, listen, if you want to own it, just go buy it with a market order. If you end up paying 17 cents and it's offered at 15 cents a day later, so what? We're not 2 cents smart on this idea. It either goes to zero or it goes to $1.
Yep. Well, a stock that you've mentioned several times over the years on my show, and a company that's a past sponsor, is US Gold Corp. Since you cover this one, can you give us your updated thoughts here?
Yes. I've been following it since and investing in it since early 2018, I believe. I started looking at it in 2017. And I was friendly with the old head geologist, Dave Mathewson. And between now and then, there's been a transformation in management, and they brought in some guys who are mine operators and know how to build mines. And so the Copper King project, which they've renamed CK Gold because it's, where we are with the price of gold now, it's the majority of the mineralization is gold and not copper. And these numbers are off the top of my head, but you're looking at a project now where, and the CEO that's in there now, a guy named George B, really, really nice guy. I've spoken to him on the phone a few times, have had some Zoom conferences with him. He knows how to take a project from where copper or CK Gold is now into an operating mine. And the process from getting from here to there is relatively simple from, in terms of what it takes to build a mine. And he knew of this project and really liked it when he was at a former company. He's been at a few different companies. And he had actually wanted one of the companies he was with to buy it, but it was too small for him. Well, now it's kind of, the project itself has been enlarged, and they have a PFS out. Is it PFS? A PEA. They're working on a PFS it'll be so extensive it'll almost be bankable, but they'll have to convert it to a feasibility study. But the PEA, if you run it under updated gold and copper numbers, I mean, the net present value of it is something like, just again, off the top of my head, say $350 million. And the market cap of the stock right now is just under 100 million. So, in general and on average, you would expect that advancing junior projects should trade, the stock price of the company should trade at a market cap that's maybe worth 50% of the PEA. So this one's a third of the PEA right now. And they're going to release at some point in the next few months, I think, they'll release a revised resource estimate, and the resource estimate they found silver in the mineralization, and it may or may not include the silver mineralization, but that's an added bonus for this property. And if everything goes according to plan, I believe they should have an operational mine by the end of 2023 or maybe mid 2024, something like that. I mean, all the pieces are there for them to put this together. They just have to go through the permitting process and the financing process, and they need to put a feasibility study out. But the time between the PFS and the feasibility study will be really brief because of all the work that they're putting into the PFS. So, and that's just their Copper King project. They've got,
and that's in Wyoming, if we didn't say that. 2 hours.
That's in Wyoming.
Yeah, 2 hours north of you from Denver, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And then they've got two highly prospective projects in Nevada. One's in the Cortez Trend, Keystone. And that project in and of itself has potential to be a company maker. They're going to, they just put out their drill plans for the summer for that. And then there's another project called Maggie Creek. And that also in and of itself has potential to be a company maker. And that's their two Nevada properties. And then they merged with a company that gave them a project called the Chalice Project. It's in Idaho. It's a gold project. And I spoke extensively with the guy who came on board to US Gold, who owned the company that owned this project. And this thing also, I mean, it sounds like, it has the potential to be 1 million plus ounce gold ounce project of, very good grades. I mean, the gold grades we're seeing coming out of Idaho properties is good relative to what you're seeing in Nevada. So you've got 3 potential projects, 2 of which could be company makers. If Chalice, ends up with 1 million ounces and it's producing 80,000 ounces a year, I mean, that in and of itself is worth a couple $100 million in this market, right? And if the price of gold goes higher, it's worth even more. So, as with Angus, US Gold has an incredibly tight share structure, 8 million shares fully diluted outstanding.
On the NASDAQ, we should note, USAU.
On the NASDAQ, that's right. There's not a Canadian listing, USAU. And this is one of those things where if one of the drill programs this summer produces a discovery, I mean, the stock could really take off.
Yep. And again, my faithful listeners will know Ed Carr he was one of the founders. He's no longer at the helm, but he was a recent guest, just so you know, about a month ago.
Well, he's an
advisor, I think, right?
He shed his executive chairman title.
Yeah.
Because he lives in Switzerland, and he was tired of flying back and forth all the time. But my understanding is that he's still, I mean, he's basically doing the same thing he was doing as executive chairman, but I guess he feels less obligated to do as much as he was doing. But he's still, I know for a fact, he's still working his tail off, because every time I email him, I get an email back right away. So, yeah, that was just kind of a change in, or dropping the title. That was just a formality. He's still working his butt off on this thing.
Yep. Well, want to move on to the next one, Dave? What else do you have for us?
Isn't that enough?
Yeah, we can do one more. One more.
So there was a name that I had mentioned in our last podcast, Heliostar.
Yep.
And so what Heliostar is it's got a gold project in Alaska called UNGA. It has an existing resource of, I don't know, 380,000 ounces. I don't think it's a compliant resource, but it may be, but I don't think it is. But it's 384,000 ounces at 13.8 grams per ton. That's the existing resource. And the guy who put Heliostar together, a guy named Charles Funk, and your audience probably knows him from Vizsla Silver. He was one of the geologists there that was involved in their discovery. And this opportunity came up, and he's still on the board at Vizsla, but he jumped to this because he thought that this was, he liked the prospective upside of Heliostar and the UNGA project. They're going to start drilling on it. They just raised money. And he thinks, again, and this is high in the sky guesstimates, but it's an educated guess. He thinks there's a real possibility that this project, it was mined historically by pickaxe miners up there. So, there's definitely gold ore to be found. He thinks maybe it has potential to do 1 to 2 million ounces of resource. But then the equity kicker, I guess, if you will, on this is they've got 3 projects down in Mexico that are silver/base metal projects. And one of the properties, and they're still, they're very early stage. And Charles, I guess, I think he's down there. Rob Gray told me, I think he's down there until the end of this month. Scouting it out and figuring out, what their next steps are to advance these projects. One of them is next to a property that Silvercrest Metals bought in Sonora, and it's a highly prospective silver/polymetallic district. And the thinking is once Silvercrest Metals starts drilling this project, if they like what they see, they might make an offer for this property that Heliostar has. So you basically have the UNGA project, gold project in Alaska with an existing resource that could be, 3 to 6 times larger than the current resource. And that would give you huge upside here. And then you've got these 3 silver projects. Each one could be a company maker down the road. So this one also, it's 42 million shares fully diluted outstanding. Market cap is, I think as of today, it's about 37 million US, and insiders own 21%. Eric Sprott, which I don't like to throw that out there as clickbait to get people to look at an idea, but he does own 6% of the stock. I mean, that's not why I invested in it. And I don't necessarily advocate investing in a company just because Eric Sprott does. He's investing in everything. And if I had his bankroll, I'd be doing the same thing too, right? He's playing the numbers. It's a lottery. When you invest in juniors, it's a lottery. So he's increasing his chances of a lot of home runs by investing in a lot of different names. So, and this just happens to be one of them.
Excellent. All right. Well, Dave, give us your information for the Mining Stock Journal for listeners that want your ideas before they come across in a podcast like this.
I apologize to my subscribers. I normally wait longer, but I'm excited about this idea. And I want it out there that I was one of the early discoverers of this idea. I know I'm not the only one.
Yep. You gave him one trading day though, right here? You gave him
exactly.
at least a trading day. Normally you give him a month or something before you'll talk about it publicly?
At least 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes there's names that I've never mentioned that are in my newsletter. So, I don't mention them all. This one I can kind of smell that and again, that it could end up being a complete duster, but to me, it just smells like it has all the smell and feel of something with huge upside. So, but my website's investmentresearchdynamics.com, and at the top, there's a link you can click on and get more information about my mining stock journal.
Excellent. And I will put a link to that in the show notes. And as always, Dave, thanks for coming on the show and sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me, Bill.